The emergency room was usually a symphony of controlled chaos, a place where the steady beep of monitors and the squeak of rubber-soled shoes on linoleum formed the background music of life and death. But tonight, the air was different. It was heavy, charged with an unspoken tension that made every breath feel thick. In the center of Trauma Bay 4 lay a giant of a German shepherd, his black and tan coat matted with rain and blood. He wasn't growling, but the low, vibrational rumble emanating from his chest vibrated through the floorboards, keeping 3 of the county's top trauma surgeons at bay. Every time a doctor stepped within 3 feet of the gurney, the dog's ears would flatten, and a look of fierce, calculated protection would enter his amber eyes. He wasn't just a dog in pain, he was a sentry guarding a perimeter. Standing quietly in the corner, holding a tray of sterile gauze and saline, was Meyer. To everyone at St. Jude's Memorial, she was just the night shift nurse who rarely spoke, the one who took the shifts nobody else wanted and disappeared into the shadows the moment her clock-out time arrived. But as she looked into the dog's eyes, a silent, invisible thread of recognition spun between them. Nobody in that room knew that the quiet woman in the faded blue scrubs had once worn a different uniform, or that the scarred dog on the table was the only living link to a past she had spent 5 years trying to bury. To understand how Meyer ended up in that sterile room, watching a military working dog hold a hospital hostage, you have to understand the silence she lived in. For 3 years, Meyer had worked at St. Jude's, a mid-sized hospital nestled in a quiet valley of the Pacific Northwest. Her colleagues knew her as efficient, polite, and entirely unknowable. She didn't participate in the breakroom gossip, she never joined the Friday night happy hours, and she lived in a small cabin miles out of town where the only neighbors were the pine trees. Her supervisor, Dr. Harrison, often remarked that Meyer was the perfect nurse because she lacked the emotional clutter most people brought to the job. She was like a machine, executing orders with mathematical precision. But Meyer's silence wasn't a lack of emotion, it was a fortress. She had built it stone by stone after her final deployment, a devastating mission in the rugged mountains of the Hindu Kush that had cost her everything, including her identity as one of the very few women to ever operate alongside the Navy SEALs as a tactical medical specialist. She had survived the ambush, but the person she used to be had died on that mountainside, leaving behind a ghost who only felt safe when she was invisible. The storm outside had been raging for hours, flooding the local creeks and turning the winding mountain roads into slick, treacherous traps. It was just past midnight when the emergency doors burst open, admitting 2 paramedics pushing a gurney, accompanied by a local sheriff's deputy. But it wasn't a human patient they were wheeling in. The deputy, a young man named Miller, was pale and hyperventilating. He explained in frantic, broken sentences that they had found a military transport truck overturned in a ravine 5 miles up the pass. The driver was dead on impact, but in the back, locked in a heavy-duty tactical crate, was this dog. The impact had crushed the crate, pinning the animal and causing severe internal injuries. The local vet clinic was closed and flooded, and with the dog in shock, the deputy had made the executive decision to bring him to the human ER, hoping someone could at least stabilize him. The moment they rolled the gurney into Trauma Bay 4, the dog awoke from his stupor. The instinct of survival, honed by years of combat, took over. He dragged himself to the center of the bed, his back legs paralyzed, and began to defend his position. Dr. Harrison, the chief resident on duty, was an arrogant but highly capable surgeon who didn't like being told no, especially by an animal. He approached the gurney with a sedative loaded into a syringe, his voice sharp and demanding. He ordered the orderlies to grab blankets to pin the dog down. But the moment Harrison stepped forward, the German shepherd's lips curled back, revealing sharp, white teeth, and the rumble in his chest became a warning siren. Harrison froze, his hand trembling slightly. He tried to approach from the side, but the dog pivoted with military precision, his eyes locked onto the doctor's jugular. The other doctors tried, attempting to soothe the beast with soft words and food, but the dog saw right through the deception. He was trained to detect threat profiles, and to him, these strangers with their sharp smells, bright lights, and invasive movements were the enemy. The tension in the room was suffocating. If they couldn't get close enough to evaluate the dog's injuries, he would bleed out internally within the hour. That was when Meyer stepped out of the shadows. Her movements were slow, deliberate, and entirely devoid of fear. She placed her tray down on a side table with a soft clink that seemed to cut through the panic in the room. Dr. Harrison barked at her to stay back, warning her that the dog was dangerous and would tear her arm off. Maya didn't answer him. She didn't even look at him. Her eyes were locked onto the dog, and more importantly, the dog's eyes were locked onto her. She took a deep, steady breath, dropped her shoulders, and let her posture relax into a stance of absolute calm. She began to speak, but the words that came out of her mouth weren't English. It was a series of low, rhythmic commands in Pashto, interspersed with a specific dialect of military German. The transformation was instantaneous. The dog's ears, which had been pinned flat against his skull, twitched and rose slightly. The fierce, feral look in his eyes softened, replaced by a profound, heartbreaking confusion. Maya took another step forward. She didn't reach for the dog's head, nor did she make any sudden movements. Instead, she presented the back of her hand, keeping it low, allowing him to catch her scent. The dog leaned forward, his nose twitching as he took in the smell of her skin, the soap she used, and something deeper, the scent of someone who had walked through the same fire he had. As he sniffed her hand, his tail gave a single, weak thump against the vinyl of the gurney. Maya gently laid her palm against his snout, her fingers tracing the scar tissue that ran down his muzzle. She whispered another command, and to the absolute shock of everyone in the room, the dog let his heavy head drop into her hand, completely surrendering his defenses. "Get me a warm blanket, a large gauge 4, and 2 liters of lactated ringers," Maya said. Her voice was no longer the quiet, timid tone of the night shift nurse. It was commanding, cold, and dripping with authority. Dr. Harrison blinked, momentarily paralyzed by the sudden shift in the power dynamic of his own ER. "Nurse Maya," he stammered, "what are you doing? You can't just treat an animal here, and how did you do that? Who are you?" Maya didn't look up as she began to gently palpate the dog's abdomen, her highly trained fingers searching for the source of the internal bleeding. "His name is Rex," she said, her voice steady and calm. "He is a retired multi-purpose canine, canine registration number 4492. He has a collapsed left lung and a ruptured spleen from the impact. If we don't operate now, he will be dead in 20 minutes. I am not asking for your permission, doctor. I am telling you what we are going to do." The deputy, still holding his hand near his holster, stepped forward. We can't perform surgery on a dog in a human hospital. It's against protocol, and frankly, we don't have a vet." Maya finally turned her head, her gaze locking onto the deputy with an intensity that made the young officer take a half step back. "I spent 8 years performing emergency surgeries on operators and K9s in the dirt under mortar fire, deputy. I assure you, this sterile room is a luxury. If you try to draw that weapon, or if anyone in this room tries to touch him without my permission, Rex will defend himself, and I won't stop him. Now, get me the surgical prep kit." The air in the room grew even colder as the realization began to dawn on those present. This was not the quiet, fragile nurse they had patronized for years. The way she stood, her chest out, her shoulders back, the absolute lack of hesitation in her eyes, it was the posture of a soldier. Dr. Harrison, realizing the gravity of the situation and seeing the life fading from the dog's eyes, nodded slowly to his staff. Within minutes, the trauma bay was transformed into an improvised veterinary operating theater. Maya worked with a speed and precision that left the other doctors spellbound. She prepped the surgical site, her hands moving like lightning, yet with a gentleness that kept Rex completely calm. As she administered the anesthetic, she kept her face close to his, whispering to him in that quiet, ancient tongue, promising him that he was safe, that the fight was over, and that she was there. Rex's eyes slowly closed, his breathing leveling out as the drug took hold. As Maya made the first incision, Dr. Harrison watched her hands. He had seen some of the best surgeons in the country work, but the level of dexterity and calm Maya displayed was something else entirely. It was the skill of someone who had operated on the brink of eternity, where a single millimeter of error meant a flag-draped coffin. As she worked to clamp the ruptured artery in Rex's spleen, her scrub top shifted, revealing a glimpse of the collarbone beneath. There, etched into her skin, was a faded tattoo of the Navy SEAL trident, partially obscured by a jagged, thick scar that looked like it had been left by shrapnel. Harrison's breath caught in his throat. He looked from the tattoo to the scarred dog, and then to Meyer's face, which was set in a mask. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the rhythmic clicking of the ventilator and the soft squelch of surgical instruments. For 2 hours, Meyer fought for Rex's life. She repaired the ruptured spleen, evacuated the blood from his chest cavity, and re-inflated his collapsed lung. At one point, Rex's heart rate plummeted, the monitor emitting a long, terrifying tone. The other doctors panicked, but Meyer didn't flinch. She initiated cardiac massage with her fingers, her voice rising in a commanding chant, calling Rex back from the edge. "Not today, partner," she whispered fiercely. "Not on my watch. You survived this. That's an order." As if hearing her voice through the darkness, the dog's heart found its rhythm again, the monitor returning to a steady, hopeful beat. By the time the sun began to rise, casting a pale gray light through the rain-streaked windows of the ER, the surgery was complete. Rex was bandaged, stable, and breathing on his own. Meyer sat on the floor next to the gurney, her head resting against the metal frame, her hands still stained with blood. She looked exhausted, her usual fortress of isolation completely shattered by the night's events. Dr. Harrison walked into the bay, holding 2 cups of black coffee. He handed one to her, sitting down on a stool nearby. He looked at her for a long time before speaking. "You're a Navy SEAL," he said softly, it being more of a statement than a question. Meyer took a slow sip of the coffee, the warmth spreading through her tired body. She looked at Rex, whose chest was rising and falling in a peaceful sleep. "Tactical medical specialist attached to development group," she corrected him, her voice low. "I was one of the few women cleared for direct combat support. We went into places that didn't exist to do things that were never spoken of." "Why the silence?" Harrison asked, his voice filled with a genuine respect that had been entirely absent the night before. "With skills like yours, you could be running a trauma department anywhere in the world. Why play the quiet nurse in a small-town hospital?" Meyer looked down at her hands, the hands that had saved lives and, sometimes, had been unable to stop them from slipping away. "Because when you live in the dark for too long, the light hurts your eyes," she said softly. "On my last mission, our team was ambushed. We were pinned down for 12 hours. My K9 handler, a man named Caleb, was mortally wounded. I did everything I could to save him, but I didn't have the gear, and I didn't have the time. His dog, a young pup named Rex, stayed by his side, protecting him even as the shrapnel tore through his own body. When the extraction chopper finally arrived, Caleb was gone, and Rex was severely injured. They sent me home with a chest full of medals and a heart full of glass. I couldn't bear the noise anymore. I wanted a life where nobody knew me, where nobody expected me to be a hero." She reached out, gently stroking Rex's ears. "I thought I had buried that part of me forever. But when Rex walked through those doors tonight, I realized something. You can run from your past, you can change your name, and you can hide in the shadows, but your purpose will always find you." Rex didn't reject the other doctors because he was mean. He rejected them because he was waiting for his teammate. He was waiting for someone who knew the language of the fallen. The door to the trauma bay opened, and the deputy stepped in, followed by an older man in a crisp military uniform. The officer looked at the dog, then at Meyer. He didn't ask for credentials. He didn't ask for her story. He simply walked over, removed his hat, and placed it over his heart. "Chief Petty Officer Meyer Vance," the officer asked. Meyer stood up, her posture instantly straightening into a perfect military salute. "Yes, sir. I am Colonel Vance from the Joint Special Operations Command," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We have been looking for Rex since the transport went down. He was scheduled to be retired to a handler's family today. But more importantly, Chief, we have been looking for you. The Navy has been trying to contact you for months. There is a new program being established, a rehabilitation center for wounded combat veterans and their retired K9. Meyer looked at the colonel, then down at Rex, who had just opened his eyes. The German shepherd looked up at her, his tail giving a soft, steady thump against the floor. For the first time in 5 years, the heavy, suffocating weight in Meyer's chest felt a little lighter. The silence she had built to protect herself didn't feel like safety anymore, it felt like a prison. "I'll take the job," Meyer said, a small, genuine smile touching her lips for the first time in years. "But only if Rex comes with me as my co-director." The colonel smiled, a warm, understanding expression. "I think that can be arranged, Chief." As they wheeled Rex out of the hospital toward the waiting transport, the entire night staff of St. Jude's, nurses, doctors, orderlies, and even the security guards, lined the hallway. There was no applause, no loud cheering. Just a deep, profound silence, but this time, it wasn't the silence of fear or isolation. It was the silence of deep respect. Meyer walked beside the gurney, her hand resting on Rex's head, no longer the quiet nurse who wanted to be invisible, but a warrior who had finally found her way home. In a world that often demands we hide our scars to fit in, sometimes it is the deepest wounds that connect us to our true purpose, reminding us that we are never truly lost, as long as we are willing to listen to the silent call of those who need us most.